Greetings everybody and welcome to our Christmas Eve Communion Serving Tips video. We hope that this video will help to just give you some information about serving communion on Christmas Eve and hopefully answer any questions you might have. First, we want to start off by saying thank you so much. We literally cannot do communion without your help. And so we really appreciate that so many people do volunteer to serve on Christmas Eve. Did you know it actually takes 60 people just to serve communion on Christmas Eve? That's a lot of people. And that's just the actual serving of the communion elements. That doesn't even consider the people that set up the communion, the people that organize the communion servers, the people that clean up after the service is over. It's just amazing. And we just want to thank you for being a part of that wonderful group of volunteers that help us so much. So we're going to cover 5 quick areas. The first is just talking about checking in for serving communion. First of all, let's just go over the service times. We'll have a 3 o'clock, a 5 o'clock, a 7 o'clock, and a 9 o'clock Christmas Eve service. All of those services will be identical with candlelight, singing, as well as communion at all services. And at 5, 7, and 9, we will have communion in the gathering room and the gym. A quick thing about the services, no matter where you sit, you are going to end up seeing both of the pastors. The pastors are actually going to give a small sermon in each of the areas. So anywhere you sit, somebody's going to get a wonderful experience on Christmas Eve. And then communion will be done in both the sanctuary and the gathering room, as I mentioned. Once we've put you down to serve at one of the Christmas Eve services, you're going to get an email from PCO. PCO is Planning Center Online, and it is our entire warehouse of everything that happens to run an actual worship services. So this system has all the music, it has all the teaching, it has all the scripture readers, it has every key person that's volunteering, and it allows us to keep track of who's doing what on any given service. When you get this email, that should come directly to your inbox, and it should look very similar to this. This one's actually for Pastor Mark, and it shows that he's been placed on the December 24th Christmas Eve service to serve at 4:30 p.m. as a server in the sanctuary at Station 3. So all of that is written on here. What we want you to do is either accept or decline. These confirmation emails are really important because your acceptance or your decline gets automatically entered into this church planning system, and we know immediately if we have enough servers or if we have to find additional people. Once it gets down to the wire and everybody hasn't confirmed, we do start making phone calls and doing additional emails. And so this is really helpful to prevent us from having to backtrack to go track people down. So if you can reply to this, it would be great. And then you are all set to serve. For whatever service you're attending, we would ask you to show up 20 minutes before the service starts. And the reason for that is that gets you here in time to get a parking spot and get any children checked in if you need to do that, and get into the sanctuary so that you are able to check in. It's really, really important that we know whether or not all the servers are here, because if they're not, we need to make sure that we can find substitutes, and that's always a little bit hectic. So if you could get here 20 minutes early, that would be a huge help. And then the other thing to do once you get in is definitely go into the sanctuary, and just inside the sanctuary you will find this communion roster that is a sign-in sheet. Obviously this one is for December 6th. You're going to see one on Christmas Eve that has December 24th on it, and you'll see all of the times for the services and then the different serving stations. And when we have the Christmas Eve one, you're going to see gathering room stations as well as the sanctuary stations. So it's important to sign in. This sign-in sheet is actually used by the pastors. They will go and check the sign-in sheet to make sure every person has signed in. As you can imagine, with over 2,000 people coming through our doors on Christmas Eve, it is really hard to find one individual person if the pastors need to find out that somebody didn't sign in and they're trying to find out if they actually arrived. And so it's really important that you sign in, because we do use that to do a quick check to see if we need to be finding substitutes. When you're checking in, these are the things you want to check on. You want to make sure you're aware of what it says your serving location is. That's whether it's the gathering room or the sanctuary. You're also going to just confirm your station number. So we have stations number 1 through 6 in the sanctuary and 1 through 4 in the gathering room. And then you're also going to check on, just confirm the communion flow. There are going to be charts, I'm going to show you them in a second, that will be available so that you know how the ushers are going to send people down to your station. And you just want to make sure that you coordinate with the person who you're serving with and know where you're supposed to stand in terms of who's holding the bread and who's holding the wine. So let's talk about the communion traffic flow. There are 6 stations in the sanctuary and 4 stations in the gathering room. We will have gluten-free in both sections. If you're assigned at the gluten-free station, you'll be by yourself and you'll hold both the wafers as well as the juice. For everyone else, we will be serving the normal communion bread that we use on a normal Sunday, which is our Hawaiian bread. These charts are going to be available when you show up on Christmas Eve. We also have them available if you want to print them and look at them ahead of time. But as you can see on this chart, it shows you where the stations are for the sanctuary. And pretty much if you're standing and looking at the altar, station 1 is going to be on your far left side. And then they just are in numerical order from 1 through 6. It's important just to pay attention to which station you're assigned. And obviously that's the location you're going to go when you go up to serve communion. But also pay attention to how you stand with the bread and the wine, because that is dictated by how the ushers are going to direct people to come to your station. So you want to make sure you're standing in a way that the person gets the bread first and then the wine. And if something happens on the day of Christmas Eve and people are coming to you a different way, we'll just switch places real quick. But hopefully we can prevent that by getting the ushers to direct the traffic in accordance with these arrows and by having all of the communion servers standing in the right place to start with. And then this is the communion flow for the gathering room. Again, if you're facing the altar in the gathering room, as we set it up, the altar is just by the stage. Station 1 is going to again be on your far left, and then they're in numerical order across from 1 to 4. And then again, there is a traffic pattern that is a little different for each section. So you want to make sure you look at that traffic pattern to see how the ushers will send people to you and then stand according to the bread and the wine in the right order. So, serving communion. First of all, when the pastor begins giving the instructions on communion, you're just going to silently get up and go towards your communion station. There will be sanitizers available there so you can quickly wash your hands. And then there's going to be a prayer, and at that time you can go towards your communion elements and pick them up and go to your station. When people come down to receive communion from you, whoever's holding the bread, you're going to break off a piece of the bread and hand it to that person. And then you're going to say these words, the body of Christ broken for you. And then that person will move on to the juice. For the juice, if you're holding the juice, you're just going to continue to hold the chalice and allow the person to dip the bread in it. So you don't need to let them drink out of the chalice. They don't need to take the chalice from you. You're just going to continue to hold the chalice. They will dip the bread in it, and you're going to say, the blood of Christ shed for you. If children come up, children are welcome to receive communion if the parent seems to indicate that they should have it. So if you have a child comes up, you can do communion the exact same way. If the parents don't seem to want their child to receive communion, that's fine. They can just walk past you, and there's nothing really that you need to do. If it's an infant, the parent will just usually be holding the infant. You would just provide communion to the parent, and that you don't need to do anything special with the infant. Couple of things to remember. Just remember when you're standing in front and the ushers begin to send people down to you, you just want to make sure you're standing in a way so that the person gets to the bread before the juice, because we do communion by intinction. Extra bread is available, so that station where you found the elements to begin with, there will be an extra plate on that table with extra bread. So if you run out, you're just going to quickly pause, go grab some more bread, and start serving again. And then again, the gluten-free, you don't need to worry about. That will be at the altar, and the pastor will give instructions that if somebody requires gluten-free, they can just come to the altar. At the end of communion, once you're done serving everybody and there appears to be nobody down in your line, you are going to serve each other. So we want to make sure that our communion servers also receive communion. So the person that's serving the bread will just break a piece off and give it to the person who is serving the juice. They will just dip it in and give themselves communion. And then the bread server will break a piece of bread off for themselves as well and dip it in the juice, receive communion on their own. And then you're going to return the elements back to the table where you got them, cover them back up with the napkin, and you can just go ahead and return to your seat. So a few safety concerns just to keep in mind, and these are just general concerns we want to make sure that everybody is aware of who is volunteering for Christmas Eve. It isn't necessarily an issue that you're going to have to deal with, but we do want to make sure that because you are a volunteer, you're just aware of some of the safety considerations that we have at our church. We do have a security team working on Christmas Eve, just as we do on Sunday mornings. So if there is an emergency, you can page any of the members of the security team by going to the information desk, and they have a pager there. A few things for you to be aware of. Number one is we do have an AED machine and a defibrillator, and those are located behind the narthex wall, so behind the information desk, that wooden desk in the narthex. There's a defibrillator there. There's also one in the ministry center, in the welcome room in the ministry center. And then there are fire extinguishers and fire alarms that are in the narthex. One is on either side of the narthex when you just first walk in those doors as you enter the narthex. That's where you'll find those fire extinguishers. We also have a wheelchair. So if you have somebody that is in need of a wheelchair, it just doesn't seem to be walking very well, we do have a wheelchair available that's in the coat rack that's in the narthex area as well. As I said, we do have a security team that will be on hand, and if you have concerns, obviously you can come and find one of the pastors if it's before the service, or look for any of the staff members from the church, and they will be able to help you out as well. So if you're running late, we do have hundreds of volunteers serving on Christmas Eve, and we need every one of them. So please we would ask if you're running late. We know that sometimes traffic gets bad. Sometimes things just get crazy with relatives coming in and just scheduling and all of that. We totally get it. But if you're running late, we would just ask that you let us know. And the two ways you can do that, one is, especially if it's last minute on Christmas Eve when the church is going to be closed, we don't have anybody at the church office working that day. So if you're running late, we would ask that you email the pastor's administrative assistant at robinbennett@ebenezerumc.org, or you can text and call at this number, 540-207-7955. We really would ask that you use that number because that's a private text and cell phone number, and it's not the church office. Because just remember that on Christmas Eve, the church office actually is closed. We do not have a receptionist working that day. So we have people up at the church, but if you call the church office, your message is likely to go to voicemail, and we may never realize that you've called. So these two points of contact would be much better to just jot down and keep on hand in case you need to contact us on Christmas Eve. Once again, we want to thank you. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and thank you especially for being able to help us make Ebenezer a place where Jesus Christ changes lives. We wish you a wonderfully Merry Christmas, and we will see you on December 24th.